Imagine you are standing in the middle of a crowded room, perhaps at a high-stakes office meeting or a tense family gathering, and someone looks you dead in the eye to deliver a sharp, calculated insult meant to tear you down and humiliate you in front of everyone. Instantly, your heart rate spikes, your face flushes hot, and your ego screams for a comeback, begging you to strike back and hurt them just as deeply as they tried to hurt you. In that split second, you are standing at a crucial crossroads. Most people believe that to defend their honor, they must fight fire with fire, raising their voices and matching the toxicity word for word. But the moment you lose your temper and react with anger, you have willingly handed your leash over to your enemy, becoming a mere puppet dancing to the erratic tune of their disrespect. You must realize that toxic people do not throw insults to start a logical debate or to uncover the truth. They are playing a hidden, manipulative power game with one singular objective, which is to steal your calm, hijack your confidence, and completely drain your peace of mind. They want to drag you down into their own internal storm. But here is the ultimate psychological truth that ancient Stoic philosophers like Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius understood perfectly. No one has power over your mind unless you give them the keys to the gates. An insult is nothing more than a vibration of air, a subjective opinion, and never an objective fact. Think about it. If a toddler calls you incompetent, you simply smile and brush it off because you know they lack understanding. So why would you give any serious weight to the chaotic words of an insecure adult whose mind is entirely disorganized? True authority and unshakable power are not found in shouting the loudest, dominating a petty argument, or delivering the most venomous punchline. True power is quiet, composed, and utterly untouchable. When you react defensively, you validate their toxic behavior and hand them the exact emotional prize they are desperately hunting for. But when you choose to remain detached and refuse to engage in their chaos, you build an invincible fortress around your mind. Your silence and your unshaken composure become a devastating psychological weapon that instantly starves the toxic person of the oxygen they need to survive. They crave your emotional reaction to feel superior, but instead, you are going to give them a chilling wall of absolute calm that leaves them exposed and drowning in the awkwardness of their own insecurity. You are about to discover how to use tactical restraint as your greatest shield, proving that the strongest person in any room is never the loudest, but the one who refuses to be dragged into the noise and instead observes the chaos from a position of absolute mental sovereignty. To step into this position of absolute mental sovereignty, you must first equip yourself with what the ancient philosophers called the false mirror framework. The next time you find yourself standing in that tense boardroom or trapped in a hostile family gathering, and someone throws a venomous comment your way, I want you to visualize their words not as a weapon, but as a mirror they are holding up to themselves. Society conditions us to believe that an insult diminishes our worth. But psychologically speaking, an insult can only cause pain if you secretly agree with it or if you place a high value on the opinion of the person delivering it. When a toxic individual attacks your intelligence, your character, or your life choices, they are not providing an objective evaluation of who you are. Instead, They are projecting their own deep-seated insecurities, their unresolved jealousy, and their internal chaos directly onto you. They are essentially screaming into the wind, desperately hoping that you will catch their negativity. Think about it logically. If a young child calls you foolish, you do not spiral into a crisis of self-doubt because you understand that the child lacks mature perspective. Why, then, would you ever give the heavy weight of absolute truth to the erratic outbursts of a miserable adult who is entirely disconnected from reason? Toxic people use insults as a twisted coping mechanism because tearing you down is the only way they know how to temporarily elevate their own fragile egos. When you internalize their disrespect, you are voluntarily taking on an emotional burden that was never yours to carry in the first place. You must realize that happy and fulfilled individuals do not spend their precious energy trying to humiliate other people in public. An insult is nothing more than a glaring symptom of a psychological wound the other person is desperately trying to hide from the world. The exact moment you grasp this truth, the entire power dynamic permanently shifts. You stop seeing your attacker as a formidable threat, and you start seeing them as someone who is mentally ill-equipped to handle their own turbulent emotions. This profound shift in perspective transforms your rising anger into an impenetrable shield of clinical detachment. You no longer feel the burning need to defend yourself because there is absolutely nothing to defend. The attack is not about you, and it never was about you. By refusing to catch the emotional grenade they just threw, you force them to hold on to their own toxicity. Your unbothered presence communicates that you do not compete in their petty category, and that you refuse to lower your high standards to match their chaos. True authority does not come from delivering a devastating verbal comeback that destroys your opponent. True authority comes from the quiet, terrifying composure of a mind that is completely indifferent to the noise of the world. You become an untouchable observer, watching their emotional storm from a safe distance, completely secure in the knowledge that their false mirror can never alter your solid reality. Now that you understand that their words are merely a false mirror reflecting their own internal brokenness, you are ready to deploy your first and perhaps most devastating weapon, which is the tactical silence. Let us return to that exact moment in the crowded room. The insult has just been launched, hanging heavily in the air, and every single person is watching you, holding their breath to see exactly how you will retaliate. The average person in this high-stakes situation panics. They feel an overwhelming and desperate urge to fill that uncomfortable quiet immediately, rushing to justify themselves, stammering out a defensive explanation, or launching a hasty, emotionally charged counterattack. But you are no longer the average person. Instead of rushing to speak, you must do the exact opposite. I want you to stop. Plant your feet firmly. Look the person directly in the eyes with a completely calm and neutral expression, and slowly count to 3 in your head. 1, 2, 3. Do not cross your arms. Do not scowl. Just look at them as if you are observing a bizarre and unpredictable animal at the zoo. This deliberate, heavy silence is the most uncomfortable thing an aggressor can ever experience. By refusing to respond instantly, You are sending a deafening nonverbal message that their words have not even registered as a threat to your mental fortress. You are essentially asking, without uttering a single syllable, is that really all you have psychologically speaking? A toxic person throws an insult like a lit match, desperately hoping that you will provide the gasoline of your emotional reaction. Your tactical silence acts as a suffocating vacuum that instantly drains all the oxygen out of their attack. When you give them absolutely nothing to push against, the aggressive energy they projected has nowhere to go but right back onto them, in that stretching, agonizing quiet. The spotlight of public judgment violently shifts away from you and shines blindingly onto their inappropriate behavior. They expected to trigger a loud argument where they could hide their original cruelty in the ensuing chaos, but your unshakable composure forces them to stand completely alone in the awkwardness of their own making. Suddenly, they look small, foolish, and entirely out of control, while you appear towering, collected, and dominant. You are proving the ancient Stoic principle that you do not have to fight to win, because true strength is knowing when to let the enemy defeat themselves. Silence, when deployed with this level of clinical precision, is never a sign of cowardice or having nothing to say. It is the ultimate display of psychological dominance, a clear demonstration that their toxic noise is simply not worth a single breath of your precious energy. Once that stretching, agonizing 3-second silence has completely sucked the oxygen out of their initial attack and left them drowning in their own awkwardness, the entire room will be waiting for your next move. You are now perfectly positioned to deploy your second weapon, a technique that behavioral experts refer to as psychological judo. Instead of breaking the silence with a defensive shout, a frantic justification, or a desperate counterattack, I want you to slightly tilt your head, offer a calm, microscopic smile, and deliver 5 simple, devastating words that is interesting. Tell me more. The average person reacts to an insult by immediately trying to prove it wrong, desperately fighting to repair their damaged reputation in front of the crowd. But by asking them to tell you more, you are doing the exact opposite. Just like a martial artist practicing judo uses the rushing momentum of a heavier opponent to throw them completely off balance, you are taking their aggressive energy, stepping aside, and letting them fall flat on their face. You are not absorbing the insult or letting it penetrate your mental fortress. You are simply putting their statement under a microscope and examining it as if you are a curious scientist observing a very strange, unpredictable animal. The toxic individual launched their attack hoping to act as the grand judge, looking down on you from a position of ultimate superiority. But with this one brilliant phrase, you instantly and permanently flip the script. You transform yourself into the detached observer, and you force your attacker directly onto the witness stand. Suddenly, they are the one in the hot seat, required to logically explain and justify their irrational, emotional outburst to a room full of colleagues or family members who are now staring right at them. Because toxic people rely almost entirely on shock value and your subsequent emotional meltdown to win their hidden power games. Asking them to rationally unpack their insult completely short-circuits their brain. They are forced to keep talking, and as they stammer and backtrack, they inevitably dig their own grave, exposing their deep insecurity for absolutely everyone to see. As the ancient Stoic philosopher Epictetus taught, it is not the words themselves that are offensive to you, but the way in which you choose to understand what they are saying. By deliberately choosing calm curiosity instead of fiery emotion, you completely negate their destructive force. You demonstrate to the entire room that you place a significantly higher value on your true intelligence and your unshakable peace of mind than you do on a fragile ego. You remain utterly unaffected, watching with a composed, untouchable authority as the attacker slowly realizes that their desperate attempt to humiliate you has only successfully humiliated themselves. As your attacker scrambles to explain their initial outburst, desperately trying to regain the upper hand in front of the watching room, they might attempt to double down and launch another targeted insult to provoke the chaotic fight they originally wanted. This is the exact moment you deploy your third weapon, a technique known as ruthless agreement. By simply looking at them with a relaxed expression and stating 4 devastating words, you might be right. The normal human reaction to criticism, especially when it is incredibly unfair or delivered with pure malice, is to immediately build a defensive wall, argue aggressively, and list all the reasons why the other person is entirely wrong. But you must remember that toxic people are essentially hunting for friction, because an argument requires 2 opposing forces pushing violently against each other to create the emotional spark they need to feel powerful. When you say that they might be right, you completely remove the wall they were trying to punch down. You agree with the possibility of their statement, but you do it without a single drop of ego, anger, or submissiveness. Psychologically, this is entirely devastating to an aggressor because it starves them of the resistance they desperately require to keep their toxic fire burning. They want to see your face turn red. They want to hear your voice shake with indignation, and they want the twisted satisfaction of knowing they penetrated your emotional armor. By gently conceding the point, you instantly short-circuit their entire manipulative strategy. The tension in the room suddenly evaporates, leaving them standing there with their aggressive energy swinging wildly into empty space. You are putting into practical action the profound wisdom of the ancient Stoic philosopher Seneca, who taught that no one can ever insult you if you absolutely refuse to be insulted. You are demonstrating to everyone present that your self-worth is so deeply anchored and your mind is so incredibly fortified that you do not need to aggressively defend your character against every fleeting, insignificant opinion. It is a brilliant display of untouchable authority, because it communicates that their judgment simply does not matter enough to disrupt your internal peace. You are not surrendering to their insult, but rather you are rejecting it by adopting an attitude of supreme clinical detachment. You become a psychological ghost to their attacks, impossible to grasp and impossible to wound, while they remain trapped in their own frantic desire to dominate the interaction. You remain completely liberated from their chaos, watching their entire manipulative agenda crumble into dust because you simply refused to provide the emotional target they were aiming at. As the toxic person realizes that their emotional grenade has completely failed to detonate, their frustration will often peak. leading them to try one last desperate tactic to drag you down into their muddy arena. They might attempt to bait you into a petty comparison, aggressively challenging your qualifications, or demanding that you endlessly repeat and justify your previous statements to the watching room. The average individual, feeling their pride threatened, would immediately take this bait, passionately listing their accomplishments, over-explaining their position, and engaging in a chaotic tug-of-war to prove they are superior. But you must recognize that this is a trap designed to steal your precious time and drain your mental energy. Instead of wrestling with them in the mud, you are going to deploy your fourth weapon, which is the absolute power of refusal. When they demand a reaction, you will look at them with unwavering calm and deliver a sentence that establishes an impenetrable boundary, such as, "I do not compete in that category," or "I have already said what I needed to say." Psychologically, this is a crushing blow to an aggressor because it communicates absolute dominance without a single ounce of arrogance. By stating that you do not compete in their category, you are sending a clear, devastating message that you do not evaluate your self-worth based on their petty, chaotic standards. You are refusing to lower your high level of rationality to match their low level of emotional turbulence. Toxic individuals desperately need you to participate in their game so they can feel significant. But when you calmly refuse to explain yourself to their noise, you completely strip them of their leverage. You are putting into practice the profound advice of the Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius, who stated that the best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. Your refusal to engage acts as a mirror that reflects their own insecurity back at them, forcing the entire room to see that their aggressive behavior is entirely one-sided and deeply inappropriate. Furthermore, refusing to repeat yourself shows that you value your own time and energy far too much to waste it on someone who is committed to misunderstanding you. You become an unmovable mountain, and they become a futile storm exhausting itself against the rocks, while they are left breathless and humiliated by their inability to provoke you. You remain anchored in your untouchable fortress, proving that true authority is not about shouting the loudest to win an argument, but about having the supreme discipline to quietly walk away from a battle that was never worth fighting in the first place. After establishing that impenetrable boundary and completely stripping them of their leverage, your attacker might be standing there in stunned silence, or perhaps they are frantically searching for one last, desperate word to pull you back into their muddy arena. This is the exact moment you must end the game entirely by deploying your fifth and final weapon, which is the absolute severance. I want you to look at them with a completely relaxed posture, offer a polite, microscopic smile, and deliver 4 simple words before turning your back. Have a good day. At first glance, this phrase seems entirely harmless, almost like a common courtesy. But when delivered at the climax of a tense psychological standoff, it is a devastatingly effective tool of ultimate control. The average person, when trying to escape an uncomfortable argument, will usually storm out of the room, slam a door, or throw one final, emotionally charged insult over their shoulder, desperately trying to get the last word. But storming off only proves to the attacker that they successfully disrupted your peace, and that your retreat is actually a panicked flight driven by anger. By choosing to deliver a basic, polite greeting instead, you are communicating a level of psychological dominance that is absolutely terrifying to a toxic individual. You are sending the clear message that their hostility has not even registered on your emotional radar, and that their aggressive outburst holds the exact same weight as a casual interaction at a grocery store. You do not have to fight to win, because you win by refusing to fight at all. When you say "have a good day" and calmly walk away, you become a flawless mirror reflecting their own chaotic behavior. Their toxic energy has nowhere to land, so it bounces directly back onto them, leaving them to marinate in their own toxic stew, while you exit the battlefield completely unharmed. They are left standing in the middle of that crowded room, exposed, frustrated, and entirely powerless, while the rest of the spectators watch you maintain your absolute sovereignty. You are proving that true strength is never reactive and never loud. It is quiet, deliberate, and utterly untouchable. The toxic person desperately wanted to steal your energy, but you have starved them of their emotional oxygen, packed up your mental fortress, and relocated to a place of total serenity. By ending the interaction with basic civility, you sever their invisible leash permanently, proving that you dictate the terms of your own reality, and that no amount of external noise will ever be allowed to compromise the supreme command you hold over your own mind. After you have delivered that final polite greeting and calmly walked out of the room, leaving your attacker completely disarmed and stranded in their own chaotic energy, you will face a quiet but crucial internal battle. The natural human tendency, even after a successful withdrawal, is to replay the interaction in your mind, letting the adrenaline linger while you secretly hope for their downfall or imagine ways to get even. Society conditions us to believe that justice is only served when we strike back and make our enemies suffer the exact same pain they tried to inflict upon us. But holding on to resentment is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. It keeps you tethered to their negativity, allowing their toxic influence to occupy valuable space in your mind long after the actual event has ended. To achieve ultimate psychological liberation, you must embrace the profound secret of true power, which the ancient philosophers called the revenge of excellence. The Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius summarized this perfectly when he wrote that the best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. Toxic individuals are fundamentally driven by insecurity and a desperate desire to see you stumble, fail, or become just as miserable as they are. They want your focus to be entirely consumed by their drama. Therefore, the most devastating retaliation you can ever deliver is to live an incredibly successful, fulfilled, and joyous life, acting as though they do not even exist. You do not need to sabotage their reputation or plot a counterattack, because your absolute indifference and your relentless pursuit of personal greatness will suffocate them far more effectively than any verbal insult ever could. Every time they try to throw an obstacle in your path, you must use their negativity as heavy resistance in your mental gymnasium, turning their hostility into the exact fuel you need to build a stronger character. When you refuse to let their disrespect distract you from your goals, You prove that your self-worth is independently generated and completely untouchable. You transition from being a reactive participant in their petty games to a sovereign creator of your own reality. By focusing all your precious energy on building a life of profound meaning, deep relationships, and unshakable internal peace, you leave the toxic person far behind in the dust of their own misery. They are forced to watch from a distance as you rise higher and higher, completely unaffected by the noise they tried to create, realizing with bitter frustration that their desperate attempts to break you only serve to make you absolutely unbreakable. As you continue to build this life of profound meaning and relentless personal excellence, you will eventually reach a state of mind that ancient philosophers considered the pinnacle of human development, a state of being completely untouchable. Imagine your mind as a massive, impenetrable fortress built of solid stone. Toxic people, critics, and emotional manipulators will always exist in the world outside those walls. They will gather at your gates, shouting insults, throwing small stones, and desperately trying to create chaos to draw your attention. But here is the ultimate psychological truth that permanently seals your power. Their stones can never break your walls, and they can never force their way inside unless you voluntarily walk down and unlock the gates from the inside. Every single time you react with fiery anger, every time you let an insecure person dictate your emotional state, and every time you desperately try to defend your character to someone who is entirely committed to misunderstanding you, you are willingly handing over the heavy keys to your internal sanctuary. You are allowing them to invade your space and track their emotional mud all over your peace of mind. The average person lives with their gates swung wide open, completely exposed and vulnerable to the chaotic weather of other people's fleeting opinions. But the master of self-control understands that true safety is generated exclusively from within. You must adopt the ironclad mindset of the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius, who reminded himself daily that he could not control the arrogant and ungrateful behavior of the people around him, but he could absolutely control whether he allowed their darkness to extinguish his own internal light. You cannot control what toxic people say, but you hold absolute authority over what you choose to hear and what you choose to internalize. When you deploy the tactical silence, when you calmly ask them to explain their disrespect, when you ruthlessly agree with their noise, when you refuse to compete in their petty category, and when you politely walk away, you are actively reinforcing your walls. You are proving to the entire room and to yourself that you are no longer a reactive puppet dancing on the strings of insecure people. You have transformed into a sovereign individual. Your quiet composure is not a white flag of surrender. It is a heavy, impenetrable shield. Let them scream into the empty wind. Let them drown in the shallow puddles of their own unresolved bitterness. You have a magnificent, purposeful life to build, and you simply do not have a single second of your precious time to waste on the meaningless noise of a chaotic world. You are an untouchable fortress, and as long as you refuse to surrender your peace, you will remain forever undefeated. True power is not about having the loudest voice or delivering the sharpest comeback. It is about realizing that the chaotic noise of toxic people simply does not deserve your attention. You are the absolute master of your own mental fortress, And from this day forward, you alone hold the keys to your peace of mind. If you are ready to stop reacting to the chaos and start living with untouchable Stoic authority, leave a comment below saying I am untouchable. Do not forget to like this video. Share it with someone who needs to hear this powerful truth. And subscribe to the channel for more psychological strategies. Remember, your absolute calm is your ultimate weapon. Stay grounded, stay silent, and stay forever undefeated. See you next video.